Beaver, a Mississauga Ojibwe, was born at Alderville First Nation in central Ontario. He spent many years studying and working across Canada, first as a wildlife biologist, then as an artist. In recent years, Rick Beaver has returned to his home on the reserve and says he's been repatriated. Here, combining early traditional influences with his scientific knowledge, he observes and interprets the natural world through his art. He's also active in a range of community affairs, including teaching, ecotourism, and land ethics. As often as possible, he revisits a landscape that's played a key role in his life: Sugar Island in Rice Lake. Rick Beaver, Down to Earth.
We're approaching Sugar Island, located at the mouth of the Indian River on Rice Lake. A glacial drumlin formed about 12,000 years ago during the Wisconsin Ice Age. The island is part of the possessions of the Alderville First Nation, a band of Mississauga Ojibwes. A treasure trove of human and natural history. It's been under continuous occupation for about 11,000 years by various peoples. More recently, my grandmother and then her mother have been coming here to Sugar Island to enjoy the walks, the vistas, the bounty of this place. Welcome to Sugar Island on the day of the autumn equinox. And a fine day it is. And in the tradition of my ancestors, the Ojibwe, I make an offering of tobacco to the Creator and to our ancestors, so that we may have a good stay here, enjoy ourselves and our life. This is Menominee Quiches, or time of the wild rice harvest. The sumacs are lovely too this time of year. The stem of the traditional peace pipe was made from this plant. Now this is why I come here. Look at this view. Been coming here all my life. It's just such a reaffirming sight. The line of the marsh, the island stepping off into the distance. Just such a joy to be here and to see this place. And here's a bur oak tree on the top of Sugar Island. Wind blown and probably several hundred years old, I'd imagine. And maybe 100 feet from side to side. Be like a squirrel highway. An oak fanned out like that to the wind almost talks. We've just had our first fall frost, and these asters, heath and New England, are in full autumn glory. They're lovely. Oh, and here's the bitternut hickory. An excellent example of the deciduous forest mature trees on Sugar Island. This tree is well named. It's now laden with nuts here at the equinox. Those nuts are bitter. An item of last resort for squirrels and other hungry creatures. Now this site is really important to me. We're standing now in the middle of what in 1972 was a Royal Ontario Museum dig. It's the site of an ancient Indian village. We had a great time here in 1972. The children were here, native and non-native, from Roseneath Centennial School. They, in fact, helped do this dig. When the people began to dig down through the soil, they uncovered recent finds, then brass buttons, and then ultimately, at the archaic zone in the soil, they discovered pottery shards about 2,000 years old. Pieces of cooking pots, likely used for soups and stews made out of nuts, fish, and wild plants. Prehistoric bone points, worked into shapes with barbs, probably used for spearing fish. And triangular projectiles, 2,000 or 3,000 years old, made out of hard stone like chert. They were used on spears for hunting deer and other animals. You can imagine the activities of people here, coming and going in canoes over to the Indian River, passing around the island, a bustle of a small village here. And if we look around today, we can actually participate in some of those things. Look at this. I would imagine this came from the Depression when a poor trapper could not afford proper stretchers. This is a length of fence wire fashioned into a pelt stretcher, very serviceable and exactly what was necessary and affordable at that time. So we have layers of time here, from the more recent down to things like slate arrowheads. We're now on the north shore of Sugar Island, a very swampy, low area with abundant marsh vegetation. I see some sweet gal, some speckled alder, water lilies. Flowers are long spent. This area used to be covered in rice at the mouth of the lake here. The Indian River had rice growing in it. The rice isn't here anymore. Manoomin. That's what wild rice was called. It was the bread of indigenous peoples. Trent waterway locks went in. The flows of the lake were reduced. Turbidity increased. And in the early 1900s, bottom-feeding carp were introduced. All of those factors have combined to result in the diminishment of the rice beds here, so that today there are none. But despite that, this is still a bountiful place. Lots of wildlife, gulls, terns, ducks, and geese, painted turtles, and the waters are still full of fish. And white cedars on the hard shore, fronting a great, old, mature, deciduous forest. I really enjoy this part of a walk on Sugar Island, coming into a mature, deciduous forest like this, full of mature specimens like this sugar maple tree, hundreds of years old, and exaggerated in all of its expressions, from its bark, mottled pattern, its diameter, its height, and the canopy high above us. And to know that it came from a small sapling like this in the shade of the forest floor. I'm approaching this red oak tree now, which at one time obviously was a double-trunked specimen. Something serious has happened to the one trunk. It's now just a decaying but fascinating ruin. The other half lives. Here's a blue beech, one of the more interesting trees of the understory. It prefers moist soil, growing in the lower regions. It has this wonderful rippled bark. It's a very hard wooded tree. Look, it's a woodpecker tree. Well, it's not really, it's a maple stump that woodpeckers have obviously taken to as a home and a source of food. This tree has been used so extensively, the holes have actually grown together. It's provided well for a great many creatures. Look at that curled bark. Here's a gorgeous mature birch, showing signs probably of stripping the bark. Likely not for canoes, but it has a gorgeous texture. Wow! Look at this magnificent red oak. It has to be 8 feet through at the base. My father used to tell a story about trees that I still remember. He used to say that softwood trees like white pine are good for the emotions, and hardwoods like this red oak were good for the body. Just being near them, touching them, hug them if you want. They are worth all of that attention. This fallen birch log is an excellent example of how fungi reduce a living thing into soil and nutrients that other things may grow. For instance, these stalk polypores embedded in the decaying flesh and indeed helping the flesh to decay. Over here we have slime molds, yellow cone fuzz slime and chocolate tube slime in the process of spreading and changing this log into the nutrition for other growing things, like this young maple seedling, for example. And this is another polypore. I believe it's artist conch. Beautiful mushroom. And on this other fallen log, a basswood, we have a turkey tail mushroom, well named. Look at the pattern on that. And further down the same basswood log, we have another mushroom. This one a choice edible called an oyster mushroom. You know, walking through these giant specimens of basswood, red oak, bitternut hickory and maple really leaves one with a sense of great awe. Wait, look at this. Here's a giant puffball. One of the larger members of the group of fungi that are edible. This will be very good for dinner. And I love that sound. And it's just at the peak of ripeness, firm and not yellowing in the least. Well, you saw the puffball go in here, to which I've added just a little bit of extra ingredients, very necessary and tasty. There's venison, deer meat in there, fresh garden vegetables from my own home, and we've managed to find some wild black rice collected from another year. It's fantastic. We always say, the Ojibwe, that the moon is Nakamas, our grandmother, mother of earth. It's said every time the moon is full, like it is on this evening, the light you see streaming down from up above are maidens that the moon has sent to dance in clearings in the earth, to reconnect and to bring home memories from this place, to comfort her in her long night passages. I've always looked up at the sky at the moon and remembered that story. Never really feeling alone after I heard it. When I sit beside a fire like this, and to know that for 10,000 years prior to this, people were coming here to live, to hunt, to gather. They built fires very similar to this. It comes very strongly to mind to me of our own pertinent history as a people, the Ojibwe. We were preceded here by the Mohawk people. We fought great battles, and there were massacres. And it's said that that's why there are spirits here today. Some of our people won't come to Sugar Island and spend the evening because they're aware of the presence of past lives. For me, I find great comfort in that, acknowledging the past. And I think it's when I lay down my tobacco and honor the previous inhabitants of this place and give thanks for the present. By doing that, I'm projecting myself into the future, all in the same moment. And I think that well equips me to face the future, and I'm comfortable with that. Well, this is it. The views that I come for. Imaginations of how it used to be with rice beds and flocks of geese and ducks. We can still see those things. And I know why people have been coming here for years now, to be nourished and inspired. It's the same with me. Looking at the atmosphere and the role and play of light, the relief of the island above the water, the tree lines, and the distant views. As an artist, I've been inspired to try and capture some of the beauty of this landscape in my paintings. In this painting, Islands March, the warm winds of April have just brought in a frontal cloud system. The perspective I was looking for here is an animated march of the islands off into the distance. As the year begins to warm up, the color of the islands changes dramatically. In the edge of summer, we're looking at the sap green foliage color and how it seems to color everything around it. Island Glow is a dramatization of moonrise over one of the islands in Rice Lake. The long shadows of eastern red cedar and the moon coming over the hill. I think I'll be painting Rice Lake for many years to come. Before we go, there's something else I'd like to show you here on Sugar Island. It's amazing how many of these artifacts can be found so close to the surface of the earth. Things that people have actually touched and made. It's a clamshell. And a piece of bone from an animal they ate. And this piece of pottery shard, likely Iroquoian by the patterns on it. These designs would have been on the outside of the pot and made with various techniques, and on the inside is very, very smooth, obviously made of a crumbly clay. Gives one a strange feeling to touch things that other people in the past have also touched. We'll return them now, as we always should. And we say miigwech, thank you. Coming to this place reminds me that the source of all wealth is the land and the things that live here. And I suppose if there's an appreciation that I have after a visitation to a place like this, it's that values themselves are things which we create. Sugar Island's a great creation. Glad to have been a part of it for a day.